Hey folks, I'd like to kick off today with a little shout out to the longtime friends of the show at Sanguine Games. They're currently kickstarting Vital Hearts, a new tabletop RPG based on isekai anime, the genre of other worlds. In Vital Hearts, you have not one but two characters. Your personal user in a modern-day Japan, who has to go to work and school and handle other realities of daily life, and an avatar in virtual reality, who uses fantastic techniques of sword and spell to defeat monsters and win the day. If you're a tabletop gamer and interested in a system in the isekai spirit of Sword Art Online, Persona, Dot Hack, and such, please do hop on over to the Kickstarter page and give it a look. I'll include a link in the video description. Thank you to Sanguine Games for your longtime support, and thank you, dear viewer, for your consideration. And now, on with the shoe. Welcome back, Interblops. I'm here once again to introduce the winner of our latest patron poll, or should I say, one winner. You see, the poll ended up in a tie for first, and so I've elected to do both games that came out on top. I'll be starting with the shorter of the two, and that is Dragonworld. Dragonworld is a text adventure with some light graphics written by Brynn Chandler, best known for her script work on a number of animated TV shows including Gargoyles and Batman the Animated Series. It was released in 1984 for DOS, Apple II, MSX, and Commodore 64. The Apple version is the one I had as a kid, but I'll be playing the C64 version for this LP, mainly because the music is a bit better. There's an earlier revision of the C64 game that includes a few real-time minigames, but these come out of nowhere, suck out loud, then disappear as abruptly as they came, so I'm sticking to the version without them. Perhaps the most interesting thing about Dragonworld is that it is a sequel to a 1979 fantasy novel by the same name by Byron Preiss and Michael Reeves. For those of you who have been around the channel for a while, this may remind you a little of Below the Root, though the canonicity of Dragonworld the game relative to Dragonworld the book is not as certain. One last thing before we get started, this LP will contain spoilers for a 40-year-old fantasy novel. I doubt this will put many of you off, but full disclosure and all that. And now that we've got all that squared away, let us make our way to the shores of Pandora and embark on another journey together. You are Amsel of Pandora, a clever and inventive dreamer. You would be content to continue your quiet life, but your friend, the last dragon, is in danger. You must journey to the kingdom of Symbaloo, and there enlist the aid of the monarch Hawkwind. Together, you and Hawkwind will encounter scheming thieves, deadly assassins, and noble royalty as you risk your lives to free the last dragon from the clutches of evil. The city Kandesh offers many resources for the journey, but many threats as well. Seek what you wish within the city, but beware the many dangers that await the unprepared. The last dragon awaits you. Well, let's not keep him waiting any longer. I'm gonna go ahead and hit G to begin the game. You are Amsel of Fandora, a clever and inventive dreamer. You have had many adventures in your time, but none so dramatic as your trip to neighboring Symbaloo. It is there that you met the heroic monarch Hawkwind, an adventurous leader who joined with your fellow Fandorans to defeat a threat from the north. That threat was from the Coldrakes, dragon-like creatures who are now ruled by the last dragon, the wondrous figure of legend whose presence brought peace to Fandora and Symbaloo with your help. You have been studying an object entrusted to you by the last dragon, the Dragon Pearl. It is a gem-like object that sends the last dragon's thoughts into your mind. You have been waiting for the last dragon to come and claim it, but suddenly, in the pearl's cloudy depths, you get a message. On his trip to meet you, the last dragon has been drugged and kidnapped. The message you receive from the Dragon Pearl is garbled and incomplete, but you perceive that somewhere in the southland of Symbaloo, the last dragon is being held captive. His breathing is labored, and you sense that he has only days to live. You must save him. You quickly gather some belongings and the Dragon Pearl, and make your way to the shore of Fandora. You will set sail in your small boat to seek the aid of Hawkwind for your quest. You are on a sandy beach. Waves lap the shore. In front of you, a small single-masted boat is tied to a stump. A west wind is blowing. The small boat sways in the surf. The sail lies at the base of the mast. Whew, now that's a chewy mouthful. I'll go over a little bit of it in just a moment, but first, you may have noticed this game has some pretty hefty loading times running at normal C64 disk speed. I had to leave it like that because otherwise it screws up the intro, but now that the intro is over, I can set the drive speed to accelerated, and that will help a great deal. Maximum 154 or 1541 speed on quietly. That should help a great deal. And let's look at what we start the game with. Amsel is actually prepared pretty well for an adventure game protagonist. Whoops, missed my first letter there. Inv. We have 100 talmas, which is currency, a wineskin, which has no use as far as I know, a pouch, which is just our bag of holding, a magnifying glass, the Dragon Pearl, and a knife. I will probably not actually use the Dragon Pearl over the course of the game, because, I know the game well enough that there's no need for it, but at any point you can just type Dragon Pearl, and you will be warped to another location. You have no control over where you land, but it can be a way out of danger if you're not prepared to deal with it. Now, a quick summary of, well, not even a summary, just a quick rundown on the basic concepts of the book, which is a little long to summarize. Dragonworld, the book, was fundamentally a story about a war between Fandora and Symbaloo. The two nations are separated by the Strait of Balamar, which is incredibly difficult to navigate, and so they've never had any contact with each other, but they have really nasty opinions of each other. Those other guys there are sorcerers, terrorists, whatever. The war was started because each country thought that the other was killing their children after some kids turned up really mangled. It turns out that the kids were actually killed by Coldrakes, and the Coldrakes were actually pissed off because the kids had been destroying their eggs playing with them. We'll talk a little more about Coldrakes when that comes up, but for now let's actually get a move on. Sensible way to begin would be get in boat. You climb in. It seems quite seaworthy. And we will raise the sail. Done. A west wind is blowing. The sail is up. The wind fills the sail. And finally, untie boat. Done. You begin your journey. The boat moves eastward on the wind. You sail the dangerous waters of the Strait of Balamar. Again, the Strait of Balamar is so bad that it actually gives sailors and fishermen PTSD sometimes, so Amsel has balls of steel to take out on this in a little one-man boat. I should also note that Amsel in the book is an absolute beast of an inventor. In the Dragonworld setting, he's the one that came up with eyeglasses, the telescope, the fountain pen, and the hang glider. Anyway, moving on, we're moving eastward on the wind, and we're going to Symbaloo, which is to the east of Fandora, so east. Mountainous waves toss the boat about. A tiny islet comes into sight. A breaker smashes the boat against the rocky shore. You stumble ashore, unhurt. You are on a tiny islet in the Strait of Balamar. The wreckage of your boat floats on the waves. Nearby are logs which have washed ashore. The trees are laced with vines. On a nearby bush grow small aromatic black pods, which you know to be dragonbane. Well, we've got a few things to collect here, so let's go ahead and do that. I should note that Dragonworld's parser is actually quite good. Generally speaking, you don't have to do much hunting for the right verb, and like I'm doing here, you can chain things together, logs and vines. Rarely will I have any need to do that, but it's good to know that the ability is there. You gather logs together. You collect strong, loose vines from the trees. Very good. And let's get some of that dragonbane. Taken. Now there's a separation between look and examine in this game. Look is to examine your surroundings just to get the area description, and examine is to look at particular things. So let's check out that dragonbane. The dragonbane is fresh and has a strong, sharp odor. Coldrakes avoid it. Well, that's a nice giveaway there, that if we have trouble with coldrakes, we can just use the dragonbane. But Symbaloo still awaits, so let's do something about transportation. You tie the logs together. Soon a raft floats in the water. Excellent. Now once again, Amsel has balls of steel because he doesn't actually have a proper boat this time, just a little raft, and he's going to go ahead into the Strait of Balamar once again on some logs tied together with vines. Granted, he doesn't have a whole lot of choice at this point, but still, gotta admire the guy's guts. The raft floats away from the islet, and on it, you drift out into the Strait of Balamar, heading toward the shore of Symbaloo. A wave leaves you beached. And now I have to change discs, which Dragonworld unfortunately has quite a bit of. There are 4 discs to it, and you have to swap between them relatively frequently, but we'll make the best of it. Fortunately, since I am emulating this, all I have to do is do that from a menu, next disc. The raft rests on a rocky beach. Waves lap the shore, and a west wind is blowing. A paved road leads into the forest to the east. The rocks of Dragonhead rise majestically to the south. Well, we can go have a look at Dragonhead. There's no real point to it, but might as well get all that flavor text in. You leave the craft and walk south. You approach the rocks of Dragonhead. They rise from the beach to a sheer cliff. Finding no way to safely make an ascent, you return to the beach. Fair enough. Where we need to go next, not that we have a lot of choices at the moment, is the Eastern Forest. We're making our way to meet with Hawkwind, and the palace is to the east. You walk up the beach to a paved road that leads into a dense forest. A west wind is blowing, and from behind you comes the sound of waves breaking on the beach. You are in the Overwood. Giant trees, some inlaid with sparkling jewels, line the road, along with dry underbrush. Birds sing melodiously. A feeling of peace and serenity pervades all. Well, hey, free gems. Oh, I'm sorry, jewels. You gather a few that have fallen to the roadside. Can't remember if there's anything interesting about those text-wise, so let's give it a try, if I can type it correctly. The jewels sparkle as you hold them up to the light. Well, pretty straightforward. Doesn't look like there's anything else here, so let's continue on to the east. You have barely begun east when through a break in the canopy you see a windship sailing slowly overhead eastward. If you can call it, you might be offered help. Symbaloo is a little more technologically advanced than Pandora, and they have honest-to-God Final Fantasy airships. They're run by balloons, and the balloons are also sails rather than prop-driven like most of the Final Fantasy ones are, but still it's pretty cool. Now, actually getting help from the windship here is not particularly important. You can just continue on foot, but we'll go ahead and do it anyway, just because it's something to do. Now we have to find a way to signal them, and the description of the area did mention there was dry underbrush around, so let's start with that. You gather some dry underbrush together and leave it in a small pile on the roadside. And we have a magnifying glass. Just a little focused sunlight ought to be enough to get that smoking. Once again, the parser is pretty good here. You can type it in as magnifier, magnifying glass, or glass, and it'll understand it any of those ways. You take out the magnifying glass that you carry. The smoke curls up into the sky. The windship spirals down toward you. A rope ladder is lowered. You climb up. The wind riders help you on board. The windship lifts and soars eastward. You stand on the narrow deck of a Symbaloo's windship traveling east. 2 wind riders work the sails and are pouring water on Syndral jewels to make them burn. This is worth keeping in mind. Pouring water on the jewels like the ones we collected in the forest sets them on fire. The Syndral gas fills the balloon sails. One of the wind riders removes some pods from a box and sets them onto the outside of the ship. You recognize them as Dragonbane pods. Yeah, those are a pretty good resource to have around here. And in an adventure game, when you have an NPC around, the thing to do is pretty obvious. One of the Wind Risers says respectfully, "We will arrive at the palace within moments, Messire Amsel." Another continues by describing how they set Dragonbane in order to repel Coldrakes. You know what a menace they were, he tells you. We must protect against their reappearance. He offers you some. You decline, thank you, but look, I have found some myself. Since you can't go back to the islet, this is another opportunity to get some Dragonbane. If you don't get it in either situation, you're kinda screwed for getting it, but the Dragonbane is not strictly necessary to complete the game, so not too big a deal. Well, we've still got a bit of the journey ahead of us, so let's talk a little more. A wind rider tells you, "We will bring you safely to the palace." The windship sails gracefully through the sky. Below, you see the domes and minarets of Symbaloo. The windship docks in an open glade near the gigantic tree that is the palace. The wind riders point you towards it. You climb from the ship and walk to the door. You stand on the steps of the majestic palace of Symbaloo. A guard confronts you and demands to know your business. Before you can make a move, Hawkwind, monarch of Symbaloo, steps into view and says to you, "Amsel, my friend, come. We will talk." Well, let's see if the guard has anything to say. That is a negative. Well, nothing much to do now but head on into that big old tree palace. You go into the palace and follow a tiled corridor until, to your right, you see a large vaulted chamber. You enter. You and Hawkwind stand in the throne room of Symbaloo. It is huge, with hanging tapestries and chandeliers. To the east is a balcony, and to the south a stairwell. The aged and wise Monarch Emeritus Ephrion stands beside Hawkwind's throne. Monarch Emeritus, he's the previous monarch, previous ruler of Symbaloo, and he's hanging around the palace as a friend of Hawkwind's, and in sort of an advisory capacity. Before we start checking out any of the NPCs in here, let's take a quick look at that balcony. You look out from a balcony of the tree palace. The forest is a sea of green below you. In the distance you see a winged shape like a giant bird. You return to the throne room. Alright, well, we're back in the room with the NPCs, so let's start by talking to Hawkwind. He offers his aid. Well, isn't that nice of him? Hawkwind rarely has much to say, but he can make himself very useful at times. And we will also want to see what Ephrion has to say. The Elder Monarch says, "Remember these words, darkness fears the flame. When you find the last dragon, this will be your cry to victory. One other thing that I can tell you is this. You must enter Monarch Tormalian's province and the city Kandesh. There is a book kept in the library of Kandesh with the emblem of a wolf's tooth on its cover. It may aid you in your quest. Look for it. Now go, quickly." Alright, that's about all we can do here. Some very useful information there, including the phrase "darkness fears the flame," which we will definitely be needing. And now that that's all squared away, we will move on south and pick our transportation. You stand with Hawkwind on the landing of a winding staircase. Jade steps lead down, ivory steps lead up. "Shall we take the windship or the horses, Amsel?" Hawkwind asks you. North is the doorway to the throne room. Both of the transportation options here are completely viable. The windship gets you where you're going a little bit faster, and that's actually why I'm going to take the horses, so we see all the sights along the way. So, down we go. "So be it," Hawkwind says, and leads you down the jade staircase. You and Hawkwind are in the palace stables. South of you are the open doors and the road to the Southland. In the northeast corner is a stairway leading up. A groom holds the reins of 2 saddled horses, a majestic stallion for Hawkwind, and a small pony for you. At this point I should probably note that Fandorans are tiny. The book describes them as half the size of Symbalese, so probably about 3 feet. The game rather rudely reminds you of this at times. Yet, on horse. You swing into the saddle. Hawkwind mounts his steed. And there's a nice little picture of us ready to ride out. The graphics here consistently depict Amsel as a blondie, but if I recall the book correctly, he actually has white hair. Anyway, let us begin the ride to the Southland. You thunder out of the stables together onto the Southland Road. The road leads you to the south at first. As you ride, it begins to curve toward the east. You and Hawkwind ride through the forests of Symbaloo. You stop at a small clearing on a hillside to survey the land before you. Not far to the south you notice a large winged form approaching, and then you lose sight of it behind the trees. Now that, as you might guess, is a Coldrake. Coldrakes are 2-legged relatives of the dragons, which have 4 legs. They're pretty much what, in other settings, you'd call a wyvern. Though related to the dragons, they are very much a lesser species and have just a basic animal intelligence. When they have a dragon for guidance, they avoid messing with humanity, but with the last dragon out of the picture, they are potentially dangerous. One other interesting point of note that just leapt to mind is the reason we're only addressing our dragon friend as the last dragon is that in Dragonworld, the dragons don't actually believe in names. So, technically, he doesn't have one. Now then, if we draw the ire of the Coldrake here, the only thing that really happens is he scares the horses off and we have to go the rest of the way on foot. But let's do this properly. Show Dragonbane. You hang Dragonbane pods from the sides of your horses. It seems that you have done so just in time. A Coldrake appears over the trees and begins to descend toward you. The horses rear. Then, smelling the pods, the Coldrake falters in the air and turns in retreat. You see it disappear over the trees to the north. The Coldrake must be searching for the last dragon, says Hawkwind. They are leaderless without him. You calm the horses and continue to ride to the south over a shadowy trail. Sharp marsh grass rises around you. To the east, the trees thin out, the air grows damp. To the northwest, you see the trees which mark the border of Overwood. It may be best to go on foot from here, Amsel. You dismount, and Hawkwind sends the horses galloping back down the trail to the palace stables. Alright, the only directions here are northwest, which is the way we came from, and to the east, where we're going into a bit of swampy area. You follow the trail as it leads through the swamp. You and Hawkwind stand at a fork in the road. The south fork is wide and twisting. The trail leading southeast is straight and narrow. A shadowy trail leads back toward the west. Well, for a change, we actually have a choice of ways to go here, and I like the look of that twisty path. So let's head south. You and Hawkwind have entered the Talamar Swamp. You stand on a road that runs north to south. The marsh grass to the south parts suddenly. Towering over you is a swamp monster. Slime drips from its talons as it reaches toward you. It roars deafeningly. Alrighty, as you would expect, and as the music sting indicates, we're in a bit of danger here. And I intend to show off as many deaths as I can, so let me go ahead and drop myself a little save state here. There we go. One more try for good luck. Alright, let's have a chat with the nice swamp monster. The swamp monster smiles as it seizes you. Well, yes, I would wish to play again, but not from the beginning, so... State load. Only thing we can really do here is run, so back to the north we go. You run north, narrowly escaping the swamp monster's talons. You are on the muddy swamp road running north to south. You stop to listen. Hawkwind cocks an ear. The swamp monster is still in pursuit. We had best make haste. And if you dick around here, the swamp monster will chase after you, so north again. You walk back toward the north. You and Hawkwind, well, we've actually seen this description before. The twisty path was no help, so we're going to take the straight and narrow, as they say. Southeast, please. You go southeast, following the straight path. The way seems to become wider, beyond bushes forming an opening ahead of you. You go through it. You and Hawkwind are standing at the start of what seems to have once been a well-traveled road. To the northwest you see marsh grass. To the south the road seems fairly well kept. On either side are thick brambles and thorn thickets. The game is going to be pretty consistently funneling us southward for a while, appropriately because we are traveling to the Southland, so we only have one option right now, and we shall take it. Together, you follow the road to the south. You and Hawkwind are standing at a place where the road north ends at its intersection with a path that runs to the south and southwest. The path to the south seems to be the route of the road before it fell into disrepair. To the southwest, the trail is very overgrown and slightly muddy. Now, continuing along the road would be the sane thing here, but there's actually something we need in the muddy area, so let's go ahead to the southwest. You follow the trail toward the southwest. It becomes more overgrown as you go on. You are at a place where an overgrown trail bends to the northeast and southeast, and seems to branch to the southwest and to the north. Well, southwest was the way we were headed, so we might as well continue on our way. You continue through thick underbrush and over an increasingly muddy trail. The path slopes into a pool of water. You are in the bog. You look around you. Nested in the reeds is a small skiff. You hop in, pick up its oars, and set out into the bog. However, as you start to paddle away from the shore, you notice that the boat has a slow leak. You quickly get out again. Now, in the first revision of the C64 game, this is where one of the action scenes would be. You kind of paddle around and shoot at flying things in the sky. It's totally arbitrary, really bad, and hard to control, so again, I'm sticking to the second version of the Commodore 64 release. that doesn't have any of that bullshit. Maybe I'll do an omake on the action sequences, but they are really no fun at all, and completely arbitrary, so I'm kind of inclined against it. Anyway, back to the intersection. If we go north here, we're just going to run into another swamp monster, and that's no good, so let's try the southeast path. You work away to the southeast. You and Hawkwind are on an overgrown trail. In some places, the bushes are so thick that you can hardly pass. The trail seems to lead from north to southeast. There is somewhat of an opening to the northwest as well. As you struggle through, you recognize a small tree whose leaves have fallen around it. These are rare Tana leaves. Well, just about anything rare, unless it's a rare disease, is worth having, so get Tana. Oh, I should check the inventory one more time now that we've got Hawkwind along. Only one new thing here, which is the sword that Hawkwind brought along with him. Could come in handy. Oh, and seeing the pearl there, another bit of trivia from the book comes to mind. All dragons in this setting have stones growing in their head. Normally these are just called dragon stones, which contain all the memories and thoughts of that dragon. However, leaders among the dragons have a dragon pearl in their heads, and that, in addition to the owner's personal history and feelings, contains a complete racial history going back to the beginnings of dragonkind, so there's a whole mess of wisdom hidden in those. Alright then, let me check the description again, see what our options are. Okay, it looks like we can continue to the southeast in the same direction we were going previously, so let's go ahead and do that. You follow the path toward the southeast. You are standing at intersecting roads. An overgrown trail leads toward the northwest. To the north, the road which intersects the trail disappears into overgrowth. It continues unobstructed to the south. I like unobstructed. You and Hawkwind are traveling on a well-tended road that runs from north to south. To either side of you, the land is wild and impassable. Once again, we're being funneled to the south, so we'll go with the flow. You follow the road to the south. You and Hawkwind are at the entrance to the Tanium mines. Around you are several shaft entrances. All but one seems to have been bricked over. It opens to the south and is almost hidden in moss. A road leads off to the north. Tanium is a liquid that the Symbalese mine for. Since they dig into the rock to obtain it, it's obviously valuable in some way, but to the best of my knowledge, the book never actually explains what Tanium is for. At any rate, it looks like our journey to the Southland is going to take us through the mines, so I think this is a pretty good time to leave off. I have to say, doing a video LP of a text adventure does feel a little weird, but I'm enjoying revisiting this game, and I hope you're finding it enjoyable as well. Next time on I Played a Thing, Dragonworld, we'll be proceeding through the mines to the Southland and the city of Kandesh. Until then, thank you for watching, and this is signing off. Today's all-you-can-eat words buffet has been brought to you by Justin Carpenter, Nolden, Zangamarth, Anonymous Benefactor, John Madigan, Sanguine Games, Misha Van Doren, Frank Grizzy, Tim J., Lolo De Puzzlo, Joshua C. Ritchie, Jared C. Rice, Sonic Rose, EX Potemkin, Alicia Goranson, Mikazaurus, DG Jono, Doug Russell, August Fortnight, Patrick Bellinger, Rob Lyons, Andy Kurland, Jarogue, Martin Schoenmakers, Mayo the Hedgefox, Hildegard Argelmach, IGV, Jazel, Joseph Hall, Hot Mayo Sandwich, Dan Larson, and with the new month, a warm and very appreciative welcome to Electric Keat. Much love and many thanks to all of you, and to all of my very generous patrons. I also greatly appreciate all commenters and subscribers, and all you quiet watchers out there. Thank you all ever so much for coming along, and I'll see you next week. Till then, be well.